What if everything you have ever been taught about the end of the world is just, entirely backwards?
Oh man, like the whole ultimate destination thing.
Yeah, exactly. The fluffy clouds, the harps, the great escape from the physical earth. What if all of that is just completely wrong?
It's a pretty massive claim to make right out of the gate.
It is, right.
Oh.
But what if the reason it feels backwards, or at least the reason we get it so wrong, is because we have completely misunderstood the first 3 pages of the Bible?
Right. Because if you operate under the assumption that the material universe is just this, like, temporary disposable waiting room, your entire approach to life changes.
Totally.
But the framework we are looking at today argues the exact opposite of that. It says the physical world is actually the main event.
Which is wild. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into a really fascinating collection of work by an author named Chris R. Villasis.
Yeah, we've got a pretty hefty stack of sources today.
We really do. We have his detailed theological essay, and that is paired with these two incredibly dense, visually striking infographics.
They really are stunning. There is so much information packed into them.
Right. And they are all under this overarching title, Order Emerging from Chaos. And the core mission of our deep dive today, what we really want to unpack for you, is this argument that the Genesis creation story is not a science textbook.
Nope, definitely not.
And it is certainly not just some, decorative myth or ancient poetry.
Right.
The author is arguing that it is the literal load-bearing blueprint for all of reality. Like, how you understand those opening paragraphs actually dictates how you approach your career, your ethics, and even how you survive really intense personal tragedies.
It touches literally everything. But, before we get too far into the actual mechanics of this argument, I think it is worth laying out exactly what our goal is for this discussion.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just a quick disclaimer for everyone listening.
Right, because this material deals super heavily with theological concepts and interpretive religious texts. And our purpose here is not to, endorse a specific doctrine or take a side in any religious or political debate.
Exactly. We are not saying this is the absolute truth or anything like that.
We are just dissecting the architecture of the author's argument. Our goal is purely to unpack the narrative framework presented in these sources.
We just want to examine how this specific worldview is constructed, right? And what implications it has if you just follow its logic all the way down to the bottom.
Exactly. So, with that out of the way, where do we actually begin?
Well, let's start at the absolute beginning, like literally page 1, Genesis 1.2, the starting condition of the universe.
Okay, setting the stage.
Right. The source text points out that the earth was, quote, formless and void, and there was darkness over the face of the deep.
Yeah, the Hebrew phrase there is tohu wabohu.
Right. It paints this picture of absolute, unmitigated chaos. But, I have to stop and challenge this immediately.
Okay, what's the hang-up?
Well, if the premise of this whole theology is that we have an all-powerful, entirely sovereign God, why is there formless chaos to begin with?
That is the big question.
Like, did the creator just purposefully make a messy room just for the satisfaction of cleaning it up later? Or was this chaos just, I don't know, sitting there waiting for them?
That it is super brutal, and he uses her carcass like the two halves of her body to build the sky and the earth.
Jeez. That's a very different vibe from Genesis.
Right. But the point is, in those surrounding cultures, chaos was an active, threatening equal to the gods. It was a dualistic universe.
Got it. Like a cosmic arm wrestle between two equal powers, the light and the dark just duking it out forever.
Exactly. But the author points out that Genesis completely strips all of that away.
So no sea monsters being ripped in half.
No. That Hebrew phrase we mentioned, tohu wabohu, formless and empty, it is not a risal god. It is just raw, unordered potential.
So it's just stuff. It's not evil.
Right. Chaos is real in this narrative. It exists, but it is entirely stripped of its sovereignty. God doesn't have to wrestle the deep into submission.
It's not breaking a sweat.
No sweat at all. He doesn't fight a war. The mechanism of creation is startlingly simple and completely nonviolent. He just speaks.
And God said, and it was so.
Yes, exactly. And the author emphasizes this repeated refrain in the infographic.
Yeah.
The primary mechanism of bringing order out of chaos is just the spoken word.
Which is a huge contrast to the Babylonian bloodbath.
It is night and day. And drawing on Psalm 33.6, which says, "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made," The text asserts that matter is not self-generating.
It doesn't just pop into existence on its own.
Right. And chaos is not sovereign.
Yeah.
The absolute authority belongs to the voice that commands the raw material to take shape.
Okay, but this totally derails the way modern minds try to process this text, right?
100%.
Because when someone today reads Let There Be Light, they don't want a theology lesson on the spoken word. They want the physics equation.
I want the math.
Yeah, they want the photon emission rates and the exact geological timestamps of when the light turned on.
Right, they treat it like a lab report.
And when the text flat out refuses to provide that scientific data, a lot of people just swing to the opposite extreme. They dismiss it as ancient poetry that is entirely detached from reality.
But the author specifically warns against both of those reductions. Velazquez calls this inspired revelation.
Inspired revelation. What does that actually mean in this context?
It means it is making a theological claim about the nature of reality, not a scientific claim about the mechanics of particle physics. It is answering the who and the why, not the how.
Okay, so let's test that claim. Let's look at how the author breaks down the actual structure of those first 6 days in the infographics.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because it really doesn't read like a lab report, but it also doesn't read like a random poem. To me, it reads like a master architect designing a living space.
That is a perfect analogy. The symmetry is the real key to the theology here. The infographics map this out so beautifully.
Yeah, the chart is really helpful.
So days 1 through 3 are the forming days. God separates the light from the dark, the sky from the sea, and the dry land from the waters. He is basically establishing the realms.
Right, so he is pouring the foundation and framing the rooms. He's putting up the drywall. You are creating the spatial boundaries first.
Exactly. And then days 4 through 6 are the filling days, and they perfectly correspond to the first 3 forming days.
Oh, wait, break that down for me. How do they correspond?
Okay, so on day 1, he made the light and dark realms. Day 4 fills the light and dark with the sun, moon, and stars.
Oh, okay.
Day 2, he made the sky and sea realms. Day 5 fills the sky and sea with birds and fish.
I see the pattern.
Right. And day 3, he made the dry land. Day 6 fills that dry land with animals and humanity.
That is so deliberate. Like, you don't go buy a living room sofa and just drop it in an empty dirt lot.
No, that would be ridiculous.
First, you have to build the house.
Yeah.
Then you move the furniture and the tenants in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And seeing that deliberate intention, it completely shifts how you view the physical world around you.
Yeah, I mean, if you are listening to this right now and you walk out your front door and just look at the trees, the concrete, the sky, this text is essentially forcing you to ask a really fundamental question.
Which is what?
Are you looking at a random collision of atoms that just, happen to organize themselves? Or are you looking at a constructed dwelling place?
And the implications of your answer to that are just massive.
Because it changes everything.
It really does. Because if it is a constructed dwelling place, then it has an intended design. And if it has a design, there are rules to how it operates best.
Which naturally transitions us into the 5 core principles the author extracts from this creation narrative. These are kind of the load-bearing columns of this entire worldview.
Yeah, let's examine those columns, because they are the foundation for the rest of the essay.
Okay, so the first principle the author identifies is sovereignty. And we kind of touched on this with the Babylonian myth comparison, but the text insists that chaos is never ultimate.
The mechanism of sovereignty here is crucial to understand, because even today, in modern pop spirituality, there is still this heavy lean into dualism.
Like the whole yin and yang thing.
Exactly. This idea that light and dark, good and evil are locked in an eternal, equal contest. And maybe good will win, maybe it won't.
Like Star Wars. The light side and the dark side of the Force.
Right, it's a very common trope. But Velazquez's framework rejects that entirely. In Genesis, the narrative is rigged from the start.
Rigged in favor of order.
Yes. Chaos might be terrifying, and it might be very present, but it is always subservient to the creator. It is never an equal threat.
Okay, that makes sense. The second principle the author lays out is purpose. He highlights the mandate given to humanity to have, quote, dominion.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I know. That is a word with a lot of heavy, frankly, really negative baggage in our modern lexicon. When people hear dominion, it just sounds like tyranny.
It does sound like that, which is exactly why the author takes time to clarify the biblical definition here.
So how does he define it?
In this framework, dominion is not exploitative conquest. You aren't supposed to just crush the earth and take what you want. It is responsible stewardship.
Like taking care of a garden.
Exactly. It is actually described as the vocation of a priesthood. Humanity is placed in the garden to cultivate it and keep it.
Meaning our purpose is to draw out the latent potential of the earth, but in a way that reflects God's own ordering care.
Right. We are supposed to mimic the way he brought order out of the initial chaos.
Got it. And that flows right into the third principle, which is goodness and moral order.
Right. The author brings in Proverbs 3.19 to show that creation reflects divine wisdom.
So the physical stuff, like the dirt, the water, human flesh, it is all inherently good.
Which was actually a wildly radical claim in the ancient world, particularly when Greek philosophy started gaining prominence later on.
Because the Greeks hated the physical body, right?
A lot of them did, yeah. They often taught that the material world was corrupt or dirty, and it was just a prison for the pure spiritual soul.
So they wanted to escape the physical.
Exactly. But Velazquez argues that the Genesis framework demands we view matter as a profoundly good, intentional product of divine wisdom. God likes physical stuff. He made it.
That is a huge paradigm shift. But, okay, I want to spend some serious time on the fourth principle.
Okay, lay it on me.
Because I honestly think it is the most countercultural argument in the entire source text. The principle is distinction.
Distinction, right.
The author observes that God creates order specifically by separating things. He separates the light from the darkness, the waters above from the waters below, the land from the sea.
And why does that strike you as so countercultural for today?
Well, because modern culture largely equates unity with sameness. Like, the prevailing social philosophy right now is that the only way to achieve peace and harmony is to erase all the boundaries.
To just blur all the lines.
Yeah, to blur the lines until everything and everyone is just this homogeneous, equal blur. But this text is saying, no, confusion is not unity. True order is achieved through distinct boundaries.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Think about a symphony orchestra. If you want unity on that stage, you do not tell the cellos, the flutes, and the timpani to all play the exact same note at the exact same volume.
No, that would be terrible. That just creates a deafening drone.
Exactly. It is the distinction, the fact that the violin is doing something fundamentally different from the brass section, that creates the harmony.
Right.
It is the boundaries between the instruments that make the music beautiful.
That is a really great way to visualize it. And what that actually translates to in the biblical narrative is the foundation for all subsequent ethics.
How so? Like, how does separating land and water lead to ethics?
Well, Velazquez points out that this principle of distinction anticipates everything that follows in the theology of the Israelites. It establishes the categories,
Categories like what?
like the concepts of clean and unclean, holy and common, or sacred time, like the Sabbath day, versus ordinary time like the rest of the work week.
Ah, okay. So the boundaries aren't just physical, they are moral and temporal.
Exactly. God's world is fundamentally structured. And to reject those boundaries, whether that's in ethics, in your rest, or in relational structures, is not actually an act of liberation.
Which is how we usually view breaking rules today, like we are freeing ourselves.
Right. But in this framework, tearing down those boundaries is literally inviting the primordial chaos of Genesis 1.2 back into the world. You are uncreating the order.
Wow. Inviting the chaos back in. That is a stark way to look at it.
It really is. And that leads to the fifth and final principle, which is relational. Humanity is made for communion, not isolation.
So to summarize the blueprint, you have a universe built on absolute sovereignty, intentional purpose, inherent goodness, structured distinction, and relational communion.
That is the architecture of reality, according to the text. That is the perfect house.
Okay, but obviously we don't live in a world that looks like that perfectly ordered house.
Oh, no, we definitely do not.
So what happens when the tenants decide to take a sledgehammer to the load-bearing walls? How does Velazquez explain the massive gap between this pristine blueprint and the burning building we see every night on the evening news?
This is where we have to dive into the massive 13-step grand narrative timeline that he laid out in the infographics.
Yeah, let's unpack that timeline, because it is expensive.
It really is.
Yeah.
Velazquez charts the course from eternity past all the way to eternity future, and it is the mechanism by which he explains the entirety of human history.
All right, so step one is eternity past, where God is just self-existent.
Right.
Step two is creation, which we've just spent all this time unpacking.
Yep, the house is built.
But step three is the fall. And the author makes a very specific claim here. He doesn't describe the fall as a structural failure of creation itself.
No, it wasn't a design flaw. He describes it as a distortion of the created order, and it was brought on by the pursuit of autonomy.
Autonomy, meaning they wanted to make their own rules.
Exactly. Humanity decides they want to be the architects, not just the stewards. They want to define good and evil for themselves rather than trusting the boundaries God set up.
The text says, quote, chaos re-enters not as a rival god, but as a consequence of sin.
Right.
So rebellion literally brings disorder. We uncreate the world by stepping outside of those boundaries of distinction we just talked about.
Which necessitates step 4 in the timeline, covenant.
Covenant, like an agreement or a promise.
Yes, and this is where the mechanics of the theology get really fascinating. The author specifically points to the Noahic covenant in Genesis 8:22.
That's the one after the flood, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
God promises that the seasons, the harvests, and day and night will not cease.
Okay, wait, I have to challenge the logical flow there.
Go for it.
Because humanity just rebelled. The heart is broken. The cosmic order is shattered. How does a promise about weather patterns and farming seasons do anything to fix the human heart or the cosmic rebellion?
That is a great question.
Yeah.
And the answer is it doesn't fix the heart.
It doesn't.
No. But it guarantees the environment where the fix can eventually take place.
Okay, explain that.
Think about the mechanics of human survival. If the physical laws of the universe break down, like if gravity fails or the sun just doesn't rise one day or the seasons vanish completely,
Then we all die.
right, or at the very least humanity becomes entirely consumed by the sheer terror of survival in a chaotic climate.
We'd just be scavenging for food and panicking.
Exactly. You can't build a society, you can't establish a moral framework, and you certainly can't engage in a redemptive relationship with God if the physical house is literally collapsing around you.
Ah, I see.
So the Noahic covenant stabilizes the physical universe so that the long, slow work of redemption can unfold within it safely.
He secures the structural integrity of the house before he starts the internal renovations.
Precisely. It is about maintaining order so redemption is possible. And that brings us to steps 5 and 6, redemption and kingdom.
Okay, and here is really the hinge of the entire timeline. The author draws a direct line from the word that spoke in Genesis to Jesus Christ, referencing John 1 and Colossians 1.
Yes, the claim is that the exact same organizing force that subdued the primordial deep at the beginning of time is the person of Jesus.
Let's test the implications of that.
You know?
Because if the average person today looks at the miracles of Jesus, calming the storm, multiplying the bread, healing the sick, they usually view them as divine magic tricks.
Right, just flashy displays of power.
Yeah, just to prove a theological point. Like, look what I can do, therefore you should believe I am God.
But Velazquez argues that is a severely reduced, almost impoverished view of the text. The miracles are not arbitrary magic tricks. They are acts of unbreaking the world.
Unbreaking the world. I like that phrasing.
They are kingdom order invading broken space. Think about it. When Jesus stands up in a tiny boat and tells a chaotic, raging sea to be quiet, he isn't just showing off. He's doing the exact same thing that happened on day 2 of creation.
Oh, wow. He is subduing the chaos with his word.
Exactly. When he heals a blind man or raises someone from the dead, he is restoring the physical order that the fall distorted. He is pushing back the chaos.
So it's like a localized preview of the ultimate renovation.
Yes, perfect way to say it. It's a preview of what is coming. The timeline then continues through step 7, which is exile. Step 8 is restoration. Step 9 is Messiah. Step 10, the church. Step 11, judgment. And step 12, the millennium.
That is a lot of history packed into a few steps.
It is. But step 13 is where we really need to focus, because this is where the author lands his most aggressive punch against popular culture. Step 13 is new creation and eternity.
Okay, let's camp out here for a second. If the ultimate goal of all of this whole 13-step timeline, is to permanently solve the problem of chaos, what does the end game actually look like?
Well, what does culture tell you it looks like?
Right, we set this up at the very beginning of the show. The cultural assumption, even among a lot of religious people, is that the physical earth is basically a sinking ship.
Yep.
And salvation is just a lifeboat that takes your soul to a non-physical, ethereal heaven where you float around forever.
But the author explicitly rejects that dualism. The text argues that redemption is not an escape from creation. It is the rescue and the culmination of creation.
So it doesn't get abandoned.
No. Drawing on Revelation 21, Velazquez points out that the New Jerusalem actually comes down to a renewed earth. He literally calls it Eden glorified.
God dwells with his people in a restored material world. The text actually says, the gospel does not despise creation. It heals and reclaims it.
It is such a vital distinction. If the material world was declared very good by God in Genesis 1, He doesn't just concede defeat to chaos by throwing the material world in the cosmic trash can at the end of the story.
Right, that would be letting chaos win.
Exactly. He vindicates his original design by resurrecting it, not abandoning it.
That is a staggering paradigm shift for a lot of people. Because if the ultimate destiny of humanity is a resurrected physical existence where we are working, eating, creating culture, and exploring a physical universe without the distortion of the fall, well, then the material world matters immensely right now.
It matters deeply, which is why misunderstanding this timeline isn't just some harmless academic error.
Right.
Velazquez dedicates an entire section of the infographic to the common misunderstandings and dangers, because if you get the end game wrong, you fall into devastating real-world traps.
Okay, let's explore those danger zones. Because this is where the theology hits the pavement. The first danger zone the author lists is reducing Genesis to just science, which we've already covered.
Right, if you read it looking for mechanics, you miss the majesty and the whole purpose of the text.
But the second danger is materialism.
Yeah, if you strip away the creator entirely, you are left with strict materialism, which is the belief that matter is all there is.
Just atoms and energy.
Exactly. And Velazquez points out the philosophical fragility of that worldview. Because if the universe is just a closed system of atoms blindly bumping into each other in the dark, then meaning morality and justice are just neurological illusions.
They aren't real, they're just survival mechanisms we made up.
Right, they become entirely negotiable concepts.
Okay, that's heavy. The third danger he lists is autonomy, which is the exhaustion of trying to be your own creator, constantly having to define your own reality and boundaries.
Which is exhausting.
And then the fourth danger is exploitation.
Let's take that a step further, actually. How does a faulty view of creation lead directly to exploitation?
Well, it goes back to what we were just saying about the end game. If you think the Earth is going to burn up anyway, if you think it's just a disposable, cheap hotel room before we get to the real spiritual heaven, then why wouldn't you strip mine it?
Exactly. Why care about the environment?
Right. Why care about ecological stewardship if it's all going in the trash? But if dominion means priesthood, as the author argued earlier, then the current ecological crisis is actually a profound theological failure. We treated the sacred garden like a cheap factory.
That is a devastatingly accurate application of the text. It changes how you view a forest, a river, or even a city park.
It really does. But I want to move to the fifth danger zone because this is the one that I think demands the most rigorous scrutiny from us.
Okay, which one is that?
The author calls it despair in chaos. Because let's try to ground this lofty 13-step theology in immediate listener-centric reality.
Okay, let's do it.
If someone listening to this right now is sitting in gridlock traffic, they're stressed about their mortgage, and they just received a truly terrifying medical diagnosis for someone they love.
Yeah, real visceral pain.
Right. Isn't this entire framework just deeply offensive? To look at someone who is drowning in the chaotic deep of real-world suffering and just intellectually pat them on the back and say, hey, don't worry, God brings order.
I hear what you're saying. It would be incredibly offensive if the author was just offering this naive, toxic positivity.
Like a just smile and have faith bumper sticker.
Right, but Velazquez actually validates the horror of the present moment. He doesn't sugarcoat it. The text explicitly acknowledges that we are currently living in step 7, exile.
Which he defines as creation under curse.
Exactly. Drawing heavily on the book of Romans, chapter 8, the author points out that the physical earth itself is groaning under the weight of this brokenness. The chaos people feel, the cancer, the financial ruin, the betrayal, it is not in their heads.
It's a real feature of the disordered world.
It is terrifyingly real.
So how does the theology of creation offer anything more than just a vague hope for the afterlife then? If the chaos is real, what's the comfort now?
The mechanism of hope here is tied directly back to Genesis 1.2.
The formless void.
Yes. The author argues that the same God who hovered over the dark, terrifying, formless deep at the dawn of time is the exact same God who meets you in the dark, terrifying, formless moments of your own life.
Oh, wow.
The text offers this anchor, and I'll quote it. We must not confuse present struggle with final meaning.
That is powerful.
And then Velazquez delivers what I think is the most incredible line in the whole essay. He says, what looks formless now may be the site of divine shaping.
I just got chills. What looks formless now may be the site of divine shaping. That is profound.
It really reframes everything, doesn't it?
It does, because it doesn't minimize the grief. It doesn't pretend the cancer or the bankruptcy or the divorce isn't agonizing, but it reframes the dark deep itself. It suggests that the absolute darkest chaos you are experiencing might actually be the raw material for a new creation in your life.
But to believe that, it requires a radical trust that the voice is still speaking into the darkness, that God hasn't stopped ordering the chaos.
That is a heavy but deeply comforting thought. So if we accept that, if we adopt this framework that the world is a constructed dwelling place, that the physical stuff matters, and that God is still actively organizing the chaos, how does that translate to just like a random Tuesday?
Right. How do we live it out?
Yeah. The author outlines several practical implications in section 5 of the sources. Let's walk through those.
The first application he gives is worship and humility, which basically just means recognizing that you are a creature and not the creator.
Which sounds obvious, but we forget it constantly.
We do. Recognizing that your very breath is a gift and that you are not the center of reality is actually incredibly liberating. It takes the pressure off of you to hold the universe together.
You don't have to be God. That is a relief. The second application is ethics and discipleship. The author notes that learning to love what God made is a crucial part of maturity.
And this goes right back to pushing against that Gnosticism we talked about earlier.
The Greek idea that physical stuff is bad.
Right. Food, time, our physical bodies, our geographic place, these aren't just annoying distractions from the spiritual life. They actually are the spiritual life.
The author insists that life is embodied. Discipleship isn't just about what you think in your head, it is about what you do with your physical body in physical space.
Exactly. How you treat your neighbor's physical needs matters just as much as what you believe.
But I have to say, the practical application I find the most transformative out of this whole stack of sources is the author's view on work.
Oh yeah, the work section is fantastic.
Because if you went out and took a poll on the street, I guarantee a massive percentage of people view their jobs, their daily 9 to 5, as the literal curse of the fall.
Oh, absolutely. Working for the weekend.
Right. Yeah.
By the sweat of your brow, you know? We think work is the penalty for human sin.
But the chronological timeline of Genesis completely refutes that idea.
Right. God put humanity in the garden to work it and keep it before the serpent ever showed up.
Work was there in the perfect world.
Yes. Work is a created vocation. It is not a punishment.
Let's look at the mechanics of that, because the text makes a brilliant point. It says, work is therefore not merely punishment or necessity. It is participation in God's ordered care for the world.
Okay, unpack that participation part.
When God commands humanity to have dominion, to work the garden, he is essentially deputizing them. He is saying, I started the project of ordering this world, now I want you to continue it.
It's like an apprenticeship.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Like if you were an apprentice in a master woodworker shop, right?
Right.
And the master asks you to sand down this massive rough piece of oak. The sanding is exhausting. It takes real physical effort. Your arms are going to burn.
Sure. But the work isn't a penalty. The master isn't punishing you. It is an invitation to participate in the master's vision. You are taking something rough and formless, and you are bringing order and beauty to it.
I love that analogy. And applying that completely elevates mundane labor.
It elevates everything.
Right, because whether you are balancing a really messy accounting spreadsheet, or you're framing a house, or sweeping a street, or teaching a toddler how to read.
Which is definitely dealing with chaos.
Very much so. If you are taking raw, chaotic material or chaotic data, and you are bringing order, structure, and usefulness to it, you are echoing the original creator. You are actively participating in the creation mandate.
So wait, answering a chaotic inbox of 500 emails on a Tuesday morning is actually a micro demonstration of Genesis 1. I am subduing the chaos.
Yes, you were sorting the deep.
That is hilarious, but also amazing.
I know it sounds almost absurd to elevate a messy inbox to that level, but the theological logic holds up perfectly. If reality is constructed by God bringing order to chaos, then human labor, when it is done ethically and constructively, is a literal imitation of the divine nature.
We have covered an immense amount of philosophical and historical territory today.
We really have. It's a huge topic.
From the ancient Babylonian myths of Tiamat being ripped in half by Marduk, to the Hebrew concept of the formless void, the tohu wabohu.
Right. And we've examined how the architecture of reality is built on those 5 pillars: sovereignty, purpose, goodness, distinction, and relationship.
And then we traced how the entire biblical narrative moves from that pristine garden through the awful distortion of human rebellion, but then it's stabilized by the covenants.
Invaded by the restorative miracles of the Word made flesh.
Yes, Jesus unbreaking the world. And it all culminates not in some fiery evacuation of the planet, but in a glorified physical renewal of the universe, Eden glorified.
It is a stunning, cohesive framework that Velazquez has presented in these sources. It forces you to look at literally everything differently. A tree, a thunderstorm, a spreadsheet, or even a terminal diagnosis.
Yeah.
You have to view it all through an entirely different lens.
It demands that we live in reality, and that reality is currently wounded for sure, but it is structurally sound and it is ultimately hopeful.
It is a very hopeful framework.
As we wrap up this deep dive today, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to just mull over as you go about your day.
All right, what's the thought?
Well, we spent a lot of time analyzing the specific mechanism of creation in this text. The fact that God did not use violence or physical force to organize the universe, he used his voice.
And God said, and it was so.
Exactly. The spoken word is the ultimate creative tool in this entire framework.
It is the organizing force of reality.
So if the fundamental premise of this text is that humanity is uniquely made in the image of the speaking creator, I want you to think about the immense, terrifying power of your own words.
Oh, man. The ability to conceptualize and speak really is the closest thing we have to the divine spark, isn't it?
It is. Every single day in your office, at your dinner table with your kids, or even just in the comment section on the internet, your words have actual structural power.
They shape reality.
Yes. You possess the ability to echo the creator by speaking order, beauty, boundaries, and encouragement into existence. Or, on the flip side, you can use your words to uncreate.
To invite the chaos back in.
Exactly. You can plunge your immediate relationships, your workplace, and your family back into formless, destructive chaos just by what you say. So the question is, which one are you creating today?
That is something to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.